Hello everyone, today we're going to be making this lion fondant cake topper.
Wanna move my feet, wanna drink my wine, wanna move my feet, wanna drink my wine, wanna move my feet.
In this video, I'm also going to be giving out 5 tips on making any fondant toppers. Tip number 1, portion out the fondant based on your major parts. In this case, I'm portioning out 1 for the head, 1 for the body, legs, arms, and the mane of the lion. I also used a small black fondant for the nose, which I didn't have in the picture. Starting out with the head, I will be marking the middle part to basically separate the eyes and the nose of the lion. And as I'm doing this, I'm very careful not to lose the shape of the head, so I keep squeezing along the sides to get that shape that I am looking for. Tip number 2, using the right tools. When making fondant toppers, we can easily make use of whatever we have around, but it's very, very helpful and very efficient to use the right tools, such as these circle cutters. At first, I actually use a heart shape to form the nose, but you can disregard this part because I ended up using something else for the nose. And I'm using the same circle cutter to make the eyes a little bit smaller because I realized that it was a little too big for the head. Now I'm adding a little bit of water to basically use as an adhesive for all the details that we're going to be adding onto this lion. Now cut the nose into a smaller piece and just roll it with your fingers. You don't need to use the heart-shaped cutter because it ended up looking a little too big for our face. Tip number 3, make the fondant toppers ahead of time. Make sure you give enough time to dry out, or if you don't have that much time, use Tylose powder. I actually used Tylose powder for this. I did it a day ahead, and I just wanted to make sure that everything is dried out completely for the next day. And now we're adding the lashes. Take off the excess water that we've brushed in. Very carefully, when you're using a sharp knife such as this one, make sure you're very careful when handling it. Wilton also has a blade for fondant, which is not as sharp as an X-Acto knife. I have the link below. If you're working with a kid, I would suggest to just use the Wilton Blade for fondant. Now we're just adding a little bit more details on the eyes. I wanted to make it look like a baby lion cartoon character, so I'm adding the details on the eyes, and you want to flatten it out with this fondant tool. I'm also adding the link on the description box below. So now you want to make a triangular shape for the nose because I feel like that's cuter. It looks a little bit more baby-like. Adding a little bit of details with this flat fondant tool, which also comes in that package on the link below. And now we're going to move on with the ears. See how easy it is by using these fondant tools? You can just easily create all the tiniest details that would be a little bit hard if you're just using an improvised tool such as like the toothpick. I used to use a toothpick before, and it's just a little bit harder to work with fondant with toothpick because it's not made for it. So I would highly suggest to buy one of these tools that I have on the detail box below. If you're currently enjoying this tutorial, please feel free to subscribe and hit that notification button. I post mostly about buttercream designs and also a lot of fondant topper tutorials. Now we're moving on with the body, and I always like using right about the same size of the head. I think it looks a little bit cuter. And now I'm just giving him a little bit of the tummy because I think it's also cute that babies or like little animals have that, you know, bigger stomach on them. And that's what I'm trying to achieve over here. But also keeping kind of like a square shape. And I also want the lion to be sitting down, so I made sure that the bottom is flat so it can sit on its own. Now these are the legs, and I'm just flattening out the bottom with this fondant tool, cutting them in half so I have a perfect proportion. Making sure they're the same size or proportionate to the body that we just made. And cutting them and sticking them to the side. Yep, and I keep checking every so often just to make sure that they look how I want them to. Tip number 4, secure the details with water or toothpick just to make sure that everything stays intact when we lift them or put them on the cake. I had to trim this toothpick just to make sure that it's just enough and it won't poke out of the head once we put the head on top of it. I'm showing 2 options and what to do with the paws. This is the first option with a circle cutter. The second option, which I really like, using an upside down heart shape to use as the paws. I think it adds a little bit more cuteness to it, so I went along with it. Now the legs, I just secure them with water. Some people use fondant glue. Wilton has its own glue, but for me, water works just fine. It's very cheap. So that's what I use. Make sure you flatten out the fondant with the body so it holds together. Securing the neck again with water. And I'm using a bottle of my AmeriColor food coloring gel just to hold the head until it kind of dries out. Now we're moving on to the arms. Almost the same process as the legs, adding a little bit details for the wrist. Except I figured it's a little too long for my liking, so I'm just gonna cut this part off and creating that wrist detail once again. Cutting that in half so it's proportionate, just like the leg. And then I'm rounding up the paws and flattening out a little bit, and now adding the details to it. Now I'm adding just 2 lines, but you can add more if you'd like. Now when sticking the arms, you have an option to do whatever you want with the arms, and I'm testing it out here. You can skip this part out, but I tried sticking it with a toothpick at first. However, it poked out of the arm, so it kind of ruined it. So this part is totally optional. You can leave off, I think, the fondant because it's super small. It's going to be able to hold itself without the toothpick. So it's up to you. And now make sure you attach the arms to the body. just like so. And we're almost done, guys. We're doing so well. Now we're working on the mane, and I'm just using a piping tip to basically create that small circle and making sure that it fits perfectly before I add any more details, which I'm pretty happy about that. And now we're just adding a little bit more details to the mane using this fondant tool. So some of them pressing on lightly and some of them purposely pressing on a little bit harder, just so I can have that variety of lines along the hair. And make sure you go all the way throughout the end, and that's gonna tear the fondant, which looks a little bit more like hair. With an X-Acto knife, trim out the ends just to make it look like there's more movement and also details on the hair. Once again, pressing onto the fondant onto the hair just to make sure that it's going to stay on the head and nothing will fall off. Remember tip number 4? It's because of this. Make sure every single detail is secured on the fondant with glue or water. And I kind of forgot about that part, so that's why I'm giving you that as tip number 4. And tip number 5, assemble on site if possible. If you have these fondant as cake toppers, if you can wait to assemble on site, I would highly suggest that. And that's it. Here is our lion fondant cake. I hope you enjoyed it. If you end up making this, please make sure to tag me. I'm on Instagram at maple.road. See you on the next video. Thanks for watching. Eat the cake. Subscribe.